us who enjoy going to athletic events go to games, we go to meets, we go to races, we go to bouts. There's one sport, though, however, that is different probably from most others. Well, there's several others in the same category, meaning that we as spectators go and we don't see the whole event, because in cross-country running, you may see somebody whisk by, but you're not going to be in the same seat to see the whole thing. We are lucky at Marshall University to have one of the most storied coaches in cross-country and track and field as well. Mike Owens, and Mike is sitting right here. I want to say, Mike, I was impressed. First of all, 30 years, when you were honored last month for 30 years on campus. Mm-hmm. And Don Russell, who is sitting here beside me, was honored for 45 years on campus. Between you, one of you is an old man. I don't know. We won't go right here. We won't go there. Anyway, I want to talk about your career here, Mike, in these 30 years. I know you are a runner, have been a runner forever. When was it you first discovered, as a young man, that running was a passion for you?
I think it was my senior year of college. I was at Florida State, and I had a roommate who ran some, and he dragged me down to the track at Florida State, and by the end of the semester I ran 2 miles on the track, and just thought, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
So you didn't run in high school?
No. I was a chubby little boy in high school.
Did you grow up in Florida?
Yes, pretty much. I was a service brat. My dad was a career Navy, and so I was born in Niagara Falls and lived in Miami, New Orleans, San Diego, Oakland, and back to Miami by the 5th grade.
Good gracious. When people talk about grammar school and high school, then where do you go in your mind? Which were those places?
Well, from the 5th grade on, I grew up in Miami. So,
okay. So you still think of Florida?
Yeah, that's my home. I would say that's my home.
Okay, after you discovered in college then that you were an aficionado of running.
2 miles.
Well, 2 miles is a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us the progress from there. How did you get from that point to Mars Hill?
Well, kind of that part just kind of faded away. You know, I moved back to Miami, got a job, was working in my degrees in accounting and finance, and I was working in the accounting world. And I had a good friend from college was moving to Miami, and he was an auditor for Ernst & Ernst, and so we wound up rooming together, and he had started running, so he dragged me back out, and I ran like 3 miles, and it was like, that's pretty cool. So he dragged me to a road race. I did my first road race, a 5K, and just had an awesome time. In fact, I remember because it was on a Saturday, I was so excited about it, but I had to go to work that afternoon for like a meeting with a budget manager from one of the departments and talk about their budget, and I didn't stop talking about this race. It seemed like the whole time, and turned out he wound up becoming a runner too, and so this just kind of grew from there.
You fell into it.
But you've run some marathons before.
Yeah, I've run 13 marathons, well over 500 races, I'd say.
What was the first marathon?
The first marathon was the Honolulu Marathon, actually.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How did you get to Honolulu?
Well, the same guy was talking about it. He and I went to run the H2 race in Atlanta. And so we went out there and we spent the night, and they had like a fair or symposium or whatever with all these different vendors, and they had somebody there from the Honolulu Marathon. So we picked up a flyer and said, this looks pretty cool, but like 5 miles was my limit at the time.
Yeah.
And so that was in July. The marathon was in December, and so we made a pact, and so we set up a little bank account together, and we both put $30 a week into the bank account and built up this big pile of money. And he had his aunt and uncle lived in Honolulu, so
They put you up?
yeah, they put us up, and we went there and ran the marathon.
But you don't just go from a 5K to a marathon, 26 miles.
It's pretty crazy.
How did you do on it? I'm so curious. How did you do on that first marathon?
Oh, we just started reading, different stuff. I mean, back then, you're talking 1981.
Mhm.
There wasn't much out
Sure.
there. And so we read, a few things, and kind of hooked up with some friends, like kind of got into the local running scene, and just started expanding. And I think about 3 weeks before we did a 30K, which is 18.6, I think. So that was the longest we had run, and so, excuse me, we got on that plane, went to Hawaii, and spent 10 days in Hawaii, which was pretty cool too.
Wow.
So that was our first trip, and the marathon was really neat. We had to get up at 2 in the morning and get on a bus, and they took us to the immigration center parking garage, and we sat in the parking garage till like 5 a.m. and then got on the line at 6 and started the race in pitch black. It was
Pitch black?
Yeah. Ran down the roads down Waikiki Beach,
Yeah.
and then around Diamond Head and away out into some neighborhoods, and came back. And I mean, it was a pretty cool experience. After I was done, I said I would never do it again.
Of course.
I hurt so bad, and but a week later, I was back doing it again.
Back to me. Of all the marathons you've done, which was the most exciting one?
That was obviously the coolest trip.
Yeah.
But I have to remember off the top of my head, I've been to New York City, that was the next one. Did New York City Marathon. And then I did an Orange Bowl Marathon in Miami twice, Atlanta Marathon, Maine Coast Marathon. That was pretty cool. Started in Kennebunkport and ran out past, at that time, President Bush's compound. And I didn't see him, but all the security guards were there, and all that was a really cool trip. And then ran a couple other smaller marathons.
Have you done Boston?
Never. I
Never
could
done
never
Boston?
quite get in.
Right.
Like for my age group, the time
Yeah.
in was
Oh.
3:10, and my best time was 3:17.
So is it based on only time, or is it based on age or anything?
Age and
Both.
time.
Age
So they have
and time.
standards for each.
Okay.
But don't be fooled. I mean, I ran, but I was never like a really good runner. I was just an average.
You finished 26 miles, 385 yards.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's huge.
That's
That's huge.
So anyways, through all that time, I ended up getting married, and we decided, we were living in Tampa and just wanted to get out of Tampa. And so my wife found a job, applied for a job at the hospital admission. She's a dietitian. And so we came up, interviewed, and they offered a job right away, and we jumped at it. So
She got the job admission.
yeah, and it was a leap of faith for me. I had no job.
Oh, gosh.
So when did you become a comptroller?
Well, we came in February, and I think sometime in April. I mean, jobs were really tight for accounting. I mean, it was just, there was nothing. And I came up and interviewed with Claude Vest, who was the chief financial officer,
Right.
and I really wanted the job, but the pay was
Oh, sure.
It was like almost half of what I was making
Yeah.
in Florida, and I said, I just can't do it. And it was to be the assistant controller. And so we said goodbye, and I was really sad. And so I kept looking, and I actually found a job in North Greenville, and I figured, well, we could live in Hendersonville
Sure.
and go both ways. And that morning, they offered me the job, and I said, I need to talk to my wife and think about it. And I went home, and that afternoon, Claude Vest called me and said, I need you to come back to the campus. We've kind of switched things around. And so I came back up, and he said, we changed the job to controller, and was able to get some more funds. And he said, he took me in to the office in Blackwell and said, here's your view. I said, coming from Miami, I was looking at Bailey Mountain.
Anybody who has an office in that building, like I said, that's the most beautiful view in town.
And then he took me out. He said, I want you to run with me. And he went out, and I ran with Claude and Daryl Norton and Gerald Ball.
Yeah.
And the four of us ran the loop.
So you certainly won that.
And I was and I took the job. May 1st was my first day.
That's great.
So that was 1988.
In 1988.
How long did you stay in that particular job?
Let's see, I was 5 years in the job, just doing that. And at that time, the college went to Division II. We were in an AIA school, and so they added some sports, but they particularly had to add women's sports. So they added, I can't remember exactly, it was men's and women's cross, women's volleyball, maybe women's softball too, was it?
We had volleyball.
Okay, so it was softball.
Yeah, we had volleyball for a while.
Okay.
Had Pat Sams was their coach there, and they did very well, actually.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
Yeah, so I had, coincidentally, when I started in May, that same month, Ed Hoffmeyer started
was
working in the alumni office, and over that time, Ed became the athletic director. And so we were like tight friends, but we knew each other, and I always joke with this, but I would say, like, in the typical Marcel way, they went for the cheapest option they could find. So my qualification was I ran lunchtime.
And so that's how you became coach?
Pretty much. I ran every day, but I would call him probably the best friend of my life, but worked up at Microswitch, John Reed.
oh, yes.
And John would run
John
every
had
day.
a very different kind of running
Yeah.
style,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there was a whole crew. I mean, you mentioned Jim Lindbergh was down there, and
Well, Vern Chapman, we used to go.
and
We ran a lot at once.
Nelson Jenkins.
Yeah, Jenks always.
Jenks was down there.
Yeah.
And so there's like a real kind of little group that was down there, and so Ed called me in and offered me the job, and
Had you ever any idea that you'd go on a coaching job?
I didn't really know anything other than what I knew personally,
Right.
that John and I, spent time, because back then there was nothing, there was obviously no cell phones, but there was no GPS or anything like that. So like he was such a nerd, he's an accounting nerd. He would like get out his protractor and his topographical map, and he'd figure out our routes.
Yeah.
And then you have this piece of paper that says, okay, we gotta go 0.8 miles, and we turn the street here, and that's how we did all our long runs together. But
So what year did this happen?
that was in the fall of 91.
So it's before the conference had it.
Correct. Well, they told us about, it
It's
was
gonna
going to
happen.
happen next year.
Did you ever have any home meets? It seemed like the guys ran out somewhere at Young Life or something like that.
We did. We've had a few. The first year, for 2 years, we hosted here on campus, and we ran the loop.
Mhm.
And the guys, if you know the loop, when you get up to the water tower, the guys would take a left and go all the way up to the end. And come
Explain
up
the
all the way.
loop, because some people might not know what the loop
Okay.
is.
Well, you'd actually start by we started on Athletic Street, but you head up the hill towards Microswitch and take a right and go all the way around and come up by the water tower, and then straight back to Bailey Street, and then down Bailey Street past the elementary school would be we call that the women's loop.
What's the length of that loop?
That's 3.1 miles.
3.1 miles.
Yeah, that's the 5 kilometers.
Okay, yeah.
And the men run 8K, which is roughly 5 miles.
Roughly 5. I noticed at collegiate athletics that the general rule for the men is around 5. What about the women? Theirs is somewhat shorter, isn't it?
It's the 5K, but it's slowly transitioning to the 6K.
So it's going to be
A little bit further, it's all, obviously the kilometers, and they do that to correspond with races in
Right,
the
I
Olympics,
get it.
but it's 3.8 miles.
Did it take you a while to adjust the kilometers in your thinking?
No, I still have it, Because we go, like, on the track, we'll go outdoors, or indoors will be miles,
Yeah.
and outdoors were kilometers, like 1,500 meters,
Yeah.
meters. And so you have these notions in your mind, like, this is so fast for this one, but all of a sudden you changed, so instead of like, 420 mile, it's 410 for the 1,500, or whatever it is.
Right.
You know,
Okay, so you got a job as a coach. Now, how do you find your students?
Well, I would tell you that was probably my biggest concern, because I guess as I grew the first few years, it was hard. I felt guilty, like trying to convince people to come to Marcel because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And we were a brand new program, and so you kind of grow into it. But I'll tell you two funny little things. One is I just casually knew a couple of local coaches, like from road races and stuff like that. So I called them, called one, and I said, I need help, what do I do? And he said, call this guy, he's the coach at Belmont Abbey, it's Father Paul. And he is he's the premier coach right now. He said, so give him a call and he'll tell you what to do. So I called him, and they said, and it was the operator at the switchboard, and she said, can connect you to his cell. So it turns out he's a monk.
Yes.
But he's a funny one because he was cussing up a storm, and he was dropping all kinds of bombs, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
But he was so funny, and it turned out he's like been a really good friend. He doesn't coach anymore, but he's still there, and he still goes to the meets. And
So he was your mentor?
kind of, yeah, to start. And what he told me was, he said, what you need to do is find an older kid, a senior or something like that knows what they're doing, and give them some free rein and kind of just shut up and listen, because they've had experience.
Yes.
You know, so this is the honest truth. The next day, I was working in the business office, and we weren't starting yet or anything. And they said, someone from the admissions called me and said, Mike, we've got somebody down here who is transferring to Marseille in the fall, and he wants to help out the team. And it turned out to be a young man that was about to graduate from Appalachian and then come back and get his teaching certificate here.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been, his name is Brad Dodson, and he had been an All-American, and his team was national champions at Brevard, and then he ran 2 years at Appalachian. And so Brad came in and we talked, and he was our assistant coach the first year. And so I learned a lot from him, structure, what to do and all that. And so it was pretty cool that it happened that same next day.
It was all in the cards, do you think?
No, yeah, there's a lot of stories like that.
In the cards.
But I went to, I wanted to go, I'd never been to a meet. So I went to a high school meet. It was the regional championships for 3A. It was at Western Carolina. And I saw this team there. It was Franklin, from Franklin, North Carolina High School. And they crushed everybody. And they had this huge team. And I was watching their coach and said, that's what I want to be like. It's like, he probably had 60 kids from middle school all the way, and they were just all over him in a good fatherly kind of way. They were just respecting him, and I could see his program was really cool. And it turned out his name was David Morgan, who was Joel Reed's roommate here at Marseille.
For heaven's sake.
Just a coincidence. And what I didn't know was that day that one of those middle school girls was the girl, Jennifer Wiggins, that would turn her program away around him.
Yeah, right.
So it was just all these like weird little coincidences that.
So did you get to know David well after that? You went out there?
I did, yeah. As much as you'd see, coaches at meets and everything like that, but I learned a lot from him because he was so calm, and that's kind of my personality, and it just kind of evolved from there.
So the first year of a cross-country team for you was what year?
92.
92.
And
And that conference was this the first year for the conference doing?
This was a transition year.
Transition.
So we were still in the old SAC,
Mhm.
which was actually 16 teams at that time. So there was the 8 teams that pulled away, that we all know, Carson Newman, and
Yeah.
but also Gardner-Webb and Elon at that time.
Yeah.
But in the other half of the conference, they stayed NAIA for a couple more years, but it was St. Andrews and High Point, Pembroke, schools like that, Leeds McRae. And so we had one conference meet with 16.
How'd you do that first year?
We actually had 3 kids go to nationals that first year. One was a girl that had went to Madison High and was here at Marseille, and I knew her from road races. Joy Ponder.
Oh, yeah, Joy Ponder,
Joy
yes.
Ponder, yeah.
Joy Ponder. She's
And
a fine person right now.
okay.
I work for
Yeah, she's their,
County something.
she does their training, physical training, I think.
Yeah.
And so it was her and one girl I recruited a few girls, but one girl, and then the other one was a boy that was a 5th-year senior here at Marseille, Neil Blankenship.
Oh, yeah.
And Neil hadn't run since high school, but he came out, and if you know Neil, he probably weighs 120 pounds.
We had some kind of running event, either at homecoming or something, because he won.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy you're talking about, Mike, was first, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, John probably did the best of any of the adults.
Yeah.
And that was basically doing 2 loops. Pat Sam said we ran too far. There was something about the distance was wrong, but it was.
See, I told you, I didn't know that was good.
Yeah, well.
Mike, Mike, explain about the scoring. I know that you have individual scoring and you have team scoring. How does that work? We're used to football scores, but not so much your sport.
Well, in cross-country, points are bad.
Okay.
So basically what happens is, if there's 50 people in the race, they finish 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 50.
Okay, so that's how it's determined.
And then you take your top 5 runners and you add their points. So a perfect score would be if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15.
Right.
But that doesn't happen a lot. It has happened, believe me, but it doesn't happen a lot. So, and then the other 2, your 6th and 7th people are there called pushers. And what that means is if your 6th runner finishes ahead of anybody else's top 5, it pushes them back a spot.
I see.
So that makes your top 7 very important. But one of the nice things about cross country is that almost every race is unlimited entry. So you can have 20 people and they all get to participate. So it's not like, say, basketball where you're stuck at the end of the bench. Even if you're not the best runner, it's a participation sport. So as long as the effort and the training is there, we let everybody run.
Let me ask you a question about the course. I know that courses are planned so that the first X number of meters is wide to accommodate everybody starting off, and the same at the end.
Okay.
What is the regulation width, for example, or is there one for the course itself? Because if you've got 20 people running, you've got traffic problems.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, at nationals, if it's an NCAA sponsored race, regional nationals, there's a set width, and I think it has to be 10 feet wide.
Okay.
I think the first 600 meters has to be so many
It's very
wide, and then it'll funnel down.
Right.
And but in a regular, just run-of-the-mill road race, it can very easily just be a trail.
I know.
A 2-person trail, and as much as you think about 125, 140-pound boys or 100-pound girls running, it's pretty rough. And at nationals, it's cutthroat. Shoving, pushing, elbowing.
I see the
camera.
I see your kids around town all the time. I'm out in the afternoons when they're doing their workouts. They're all running on Main Street and all over. Have you plotted out a specific course here in town where you have people come to campus? What is your course like? And do you use something that you created yourself or what?
Well, we don't have a home meet. We did those first couple of years because it was way different, 25 years ago. But because there's nowhere to run, that's not on the roads here.
Right.
But we have training runs, and just that have kind of morphed over the years. And so everybody knows, like today we're going to President's Loop, and that's up, past Dr. Lennon's old house out there, or wherever it is. But they also have like really cute names for them. Like there's the Punisher.
What is
The Punisher is actually when you go out to the water tower.
Okay.
And you go out and you get out near the end, and there's a place where you can cut the trail and goes up over the top of the mountain and comes down on Bruce Road.
Yeah.
It's awful. The Punisher. And there's the Chin Scraper where the hill's so sharp, sharp that going uphill that they say you can run and you scrape your chin.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's the Wounded Dog, the Angry Goat.
Where's the Wounded Dog?
Both of those come from Stacy Mark. If you Stacy.
Yeah.
They're both out past the rec park where an angry goat chased her one time.
Okay,
and then
so that's how it is.
Yeah, they just kind of pick up names and they stick. And
The Joanne Crooms goat.
could
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes, goes right out that way. Yeah. I was interested in the punishment your athletes take. Is there a requirement, a medical requirement for checkups over a period of time? Is there any special medical checking that you do for?
not necessarily. All the athletes when we come in the first day of training camp, they all have to have a physical. If they're an incoming freshman, they don't have to have one because they already have to provide it
to get in, right?
But the first day of training camp, everyone waits in line at the infirmary to get their physical, and Kelly, our trainer, checks everybody, and there's all kinds of forms they have to fill out, about their medical history.
So you know a lot about these young people. You have to know this as a coach.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you were laughing about it late a while ago. What about diets? Of course, these kids are not going to put on weight because they're running all the time.
Yeah.
Do you talk about diets as a part of your training?
The girls are interested, the guys could care less. I mean, and I know that's a generalization, but
Yeah.
I think for the most part, especially the guys, because like an elite type level kid is running anywhere from 50, 80 miles a week, 50 weeks a year. You're talking 3,000 to 4,000 miles they're running per year. I mean, they're obviously burning it off.
Oh, wow.
So what about the night before, let's say the evening before you have a run the next day? What do people eat?
What do you do?
Well, I mean, when we're on the road, it's usually a pasta or type
Yeah,
of place.
that's Yeah.
And I mean, but everyone, I mean, not everyone, but the theory is that really it's your Thursday night meal that
Instead
matters.
of-
Because that Friday is still waiting to be, Saturday morning is still not totally digested, I guess. So it said that your energy comes from your Thursday night meal, so. But yeah, for the most part, you know, they're not, you know, I think the women are more conscious of it, I guess. Maybe that's just the nature of women compared to guys. The guys just shovel the food in their mouth, and I can remember when I used to be able to do that, but not anymore, you know. It's, you know, that little metabolism thing hits you, and life changes. But
Think of all the people that you've had that have been academically awarded, though. You had Nathan Jones just, 2 years ago was Nathan been going on?
2 years,
Yeah, and he was not only the scholar athlete for the 4 cross country, he was the scholar athlete for the men, all
the whole
the men's sports in the SAC.
That's pretty amazing.
It is, because
That's, you know, well, there's an old joke that it said that if you go to a high school and you want to know the 5 fastest, or excuse me, the 5 smartest kids on campus, just go to cross country practice. You know, they usually tend to be, you know, well motivated and time management, and because they have to, because they spend a lot of time practicing.
Yeah.
So how many scholar athletes have you had in these years?
Oh my gosh, a lot. And a lot of, I was thinking about that, a lot of double and triple times. Like we had a young lady, Rachel Vitalik, who was a three-time, and she's actually a doctor. She's a Navy doctor, and I know Brock Bailey was 2 times.
Yeah, Brock Bailey, I knew Brock very well.
Yeah, Nathan was at least 3 times.
Mhm.
And just going back to some odd, I mean, not that he's odd, but Eric Smith was a scholar athlete who later became a professor here at Norris Hill. A bunch. Angie Kidd, if you remember her, she graduated years ago.
That's
she was
right.
valedictorian, yeah.
Do you know what she's doing now? I don't know. I had her in class a couple of times and really
She
was
went-
a great student.
She did her graduate work at University of Georgia, but spent the whole time in Miami, in the Everglades somewhere, doing field work with animals. And so she's graduated. She might be working her PhD maybe.
Yeah, she's a few years out now.
Yeah, she's about 4 years out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so we've had a lot of scholar athletes, a lot of smart kids. I think they started the award in 2001 for the team academical All-American Award, and our women have been every year.
And you guys have been there some
Most
times.
years, yeah. There's,
Yeah.
you know, there's always that one kid that'll catch it, you know.
Is there, you make an interesting point, you talk about time management, which being a factor in this. Is there a lesson to be learned from other students, watching your students, for example? Because I think, I'm very much aware that in theater, my field is theater, that time management is huge for folks I work with as well. And they tend to use the time they do have free better, that is away from what they're doing, is their craft. They use it better perhaps than the average student. Their time is, do you find that?
Oh, yes. Oh, there's no question. And oftentimes they say that the students do better in their courses when this semester their sport is in season than the off semester.
Right, because they know they have to manage time now.
Yeah, I believe that, yeah. And it's interesting too, because when we're hardly ever out of season, because we're competing in 3 sports.
Right.
But especially like when we finish up at the end of April, we got maybe 2 weeks to go. The kids are in the office all the time. I don't know what to do. I'm so bored. Why don't you say, I've already taken care of that, you know?
Highly motivated.
Yeah, that's. Now they're not all perfect.
Yeah.
As I always say that. I mean, if you have an incoming class of 6 or 7, 8 kids on your one team, invariably you'll get one that just doesn't get it, you know. But I guess that's true about all students.
So when did you inherit track and field? When did we take that up?
That's a pretty good story. When I started, after a couple of years, once it kind of got feet on the ground and just figured out what's going on, at that time, there was 3 schools in the whole southeastern region that had track. High Point, Pembroke, and Francis Marion.
Yeah.
They're not close here at all.
No, those are the only 3 schools that had it, and so if you were a distance runner, you'd run in the fall, and you weren't doing anything. So I started taking the kids to the distance runners that were interested. I would take them to track meets, and unfortunately, it was out of my pocket. I'd drive them in my car, or we'd carpool, and I paid the fees, and we went, and it just started to grow. And what would happen, and is it grew. It just didn't happen overnight. But basically, if you wanted to be a full-time runner, this was the place to go, because you could train in mountains. The program was starting to pick up, and you could run all year round. And so we got better, but there's a lot of factors that went into it. But basically, I'll just be bluntly on it, because after I had gone, been working for so long in the business office, and I was just like fried. I was fried,
You had time.
Yeah, because it was always an extra duty. So I'd have to come in like 6:30, 7 in the morning, work to 3:30, and then have practice and get home at 6:30, 7.
When did you phase out the business office part?
Well, that was at the end. It was just getting bad, and at that time, Dr. Bentley had retired, and Claude had left, and we had a new regime, and things were just just wasn't happy. And without dredging all that up, but it wasn't the cross country side; it was the business side. I was just really unhappy, and so I actually started looking for another job, and I had another job similar to this lined up, and was literally just trying to figure out, do I want to make this jump, because I didn't want to leave, because this was like my baby, so to speak. And I was leaving work, and I walked in outside Blackwell in the parking lot, and Dr. Lennon stopped me, and he was in one of his, we need to get more students, and he said, Mike, what would it take for us to add track so we can get more students? And so in the moment of nothing to lose, I said, I'd have to coach full-time. I'd have to have at least a partial or a full-time assistant, and this was like crazy at the time. I said I would need 2 scholarships for each team, because we had like $6,000, I think, or something for. That's all we had to fund the whole program.
You wouldn't believe how underfunded
Yes.
you are compared to your
Did
competitors
Dr. Lennon
now.
come through? Did he come through?
Well, he said, let me think about that. And I said, okay. And the next day he came back, walked down to the business office, my office, and he said, Mike, let's do it. And so I became a full-time coach. I moved down to the gym, and that was about after 8 years. So 5 years of no coaching and 3 years doing both. And then so it's been 20 years, I guess.
So
Give or take a year or two.
So you've been away from all the business stuff?
No.
Oh.
I got sucked back in.
How did you get sucked back in?
Well, things were pretty rough for a while there.
Yes, they were.
So basically, after I left and Claude left, there was a succession. I think there was like 5 or 6 different chief financial officer, controllers. They kept coming in, and so he said, he asked me, he said, would you come back? We've got this new guy. I can't remember his name, but we got this new guy. I just want to spend some time with him and help out. And so I did that for a while, a couple of weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and then it was a Saturday morning, and I was in the business office doing all this work, and I was the only one there, and I was the only one not getting paid. And so we talked about it, and he finally let me go. It wasn't pretty. Let's put it that way. He said, "Forget it, just go away." And so then the regime changed, and Dr. Lunsford, came in, and Chuck Williams was working there at the time.
Yeah, Chuck would be a good person to be
Oh
with.
yeah, he was awesome.
Chuck was great.
But because of all the turmoil in the business office, we were 3 years behind on the audit.
That's right.
And so Chuck said, come back, and I would pay you to come back part-time for like 6 months or a year, and because we had like proposed like over a $500,000 bill from the auditor company.
Goodness gracious.
And to do 3 years of audit in such a short time. And so I said, yeah, I would do it because I really like Chuck, and I would do it to help the
I
college.
remember what was on the horizon, Saks.
Yeah.
And they could
Oh
have,
my gosh.
they
I
could have
remember.
bombed us and they didn't.
They got us on some stuff.
Yes, but they could have just said,
Yeah.
and the finance person did not do that. He said, I know you're working on getting this right.
I remember the woman, she was actually a nun, but she worked in this, and she came in and she leveled us on some stuff. I mean, it was intense.
It was supposed to.
She was tough, yeah. But so the plan was that I would work for 6 months, and then it just kind of phase out and go away. And so at the end of that 6 months, or a little bit later, Chuck left, and so I got sucked back in again. And so I've never been really. I just kind of helped with the audit during the summer, but in a way, it's kind of a two-sided sword, blessing, because I don't like a lot of coaches right now. They're off somewhere, working summer camps, and I got to stay home. And it's pretty much like contract work. I know that by this date I have to have this done, and by that date, but I can do it. If I want to do it Sunday night, I can.
But your training and your knowledge of this place is enormously valuable. You've had such continuity for 30 years, for goodness sake. So you know how it works.
Yeah. I mean, I'm between the business office. I guess because I've seen both sides.
Right.
And as David Rubens always tells me, he says, I don't like the fact that you know both sides. It makes me nervous. He says, when I'm BSing, or telling a story. So.
Well, did you ultimately have the programs in cross country and track and field been funded to the level you feel is appropriate?
No,
No,
we
it's
never
not
been
anymore.
close.
None.
I think part of it is, we're a victim of our own success. Like, we were pretty good, and when the money started to get free-flowing a little bit more, we weren't getting any. And when they started taking money back, we were usually the first program to go. So that next year, that promise of hiring an assistant coach became Brock Bailey.
Yeah.
And Brock stayed for 3 years, and then went to teach down in South Carolina. And when Brock left, when we hired Stacey Mark, they yanked almost the whole salary back and said, no, you can't have it anymore, basically. And the next year, the first year after the 2 scholarships, it got cut right away back to 0.9 or something like that. So it was a little bait and switch, but the fact was we had a program, and I got to coach full time. And so it's actually the indoor, outdoor track coach, cross country coach, and the compliance officer at that time.
The compliance
You
officer.
bring your car over here, just,
Yeah. But when I went back to the business office, I lost the compliance partner. I was able to drop that off, and Rick Baker took that up after that.
Yeah, that,
Thank goodness.
yes.
Well, when was the first year you were named Conference Coach of the Year?
I have to remember my years, 95, I think. So it was right, Elon was in our conference, and they just crushed everybody, and obviously they had resources that nobody else had. But we kept getting closer to them each year. And the year they left in 95, that was their last year, and that year we finished second, our men's finished second behind them just by a few points. And so I was voted Coach of the Year for, I guess, just being that close. And that was the first year. And then the next year after they left, we raced against them at Charlotte. But they cannibalized all their teams to prop up football, and we crushed them. So it wasn't any fun. But that's that year. After that, then we started. 96 was the year that both teams won for the first time.
So how many times have you now been Coach of the Year in the conference?
Well, if you count everything, about 50 sometimes. I don't know the exact amount.
How many people know this?
I've been region coach, Southeast region coach,
Yes.
12 times.
12 times.
Been conference times.
Right.
Yeah.
And how many straight conference championships did the men
The
win?
men won 18.
And that tied the NCAA record of, was it Penn State volleyball?
Penn State volleyball went ahead of us. They won like 22 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So we lost out, yeah. So we stayed, we're either the second or the third longest streak in NCAA history in any division, or any level.
Tell me why do we know this? Why isn't this more well-known? Is it because, are you responsible for your own PR?
Yeah.
Or is you personally, does that not come to the?
Well, Rick doesn't, Rick Baker.
You're right.
He can't travel with us, because he's got so many other sports like work.
Yeah.
So you're left to do your own promotion.
Yeah, so we have to we'll send him like the highlights, sort of, and then he'll just throw something up in there. He's got some help now, which makes a bit of a
A
difference.
little difference, but he's another one that works.
Yeah,
all the time.
he's amazing. But I'd say a couple things is that, we don't have a home presence. We don't.
Right.
We don't have a track facility. We don't.
Have you asked for one? Is that a non? No, I'm asking you as someone outside. And what sort of responses have you gotten over the years?
Well, I'll tell you, for the track, we would have had one if Dr. Knott hadn't left and Chuck.
Yeah.
Because that was in the works. So I guess they kind of put it into just like a small capsule is that, obviously the money wouldn't have come from the college. We had to figure out where the money would come from. And there's a man that owns a Belk department store, Ike Belk, and he's on the U.S. Olympic Track and Field Committee. And over the course of like 20, 25 years, he's built 20-some tracks in North and South Carolina. I mean, you can start, Charlotte, Johnson C. Smith, Davidson, Gardner-Webb. You can just go on.
Does he know you are on the list?
Well, yeah, he built all these tracks, and so Jim Cox actually knew him very well when Jim was our fundraising director, development director, and also we had one of our trustees was like the best friend with Mike Belk's son. So over the course of a few years, we're starting to develop this relationship and trying to set up, actually making this happen. And then Jim, we had to retired, and it kind of went to the back burner for a little bit. And I kind of kept stirring the pot with Coach Riggins, and eventually it was just kind of an odd thing, like Coach Riggins and Dr. Lunsford, and I think it was Carl Beard was here at the time. It was right before Bud came back, And just out of the blue, I didn't even know they went and saw Mr. Belk and asked him for the money for the track. And basically, like David tell you, if you were to ask David, and I don't mean this to sound bad for anything, Dave doesn't even know which direction they're running the track, much less anything about track. None of them did. And so they went to talk to probably the most powerful man, track and field-wise, in the United States, asking money for a track, and they knew nothing about it. And they weren't prepared, and he sent them with their tails, between their legs. They left. He gave them $100,000, but instead of using it towards the track, he used it to fix the quarry practice field. So we were stuck with nothing, and in the interim, they came back with the story that, Mr. Belk is not building tracks anymore. But since then, he's built the one at Wingate, he's built the one at Little Orion. He's built a bunch more tracks.
Where would you put one on campus, Mike?
Well, originally there was a track in the stadium.
That's right, I know that.
And when Chuck and Dr. Knott were here, we were looking at two possibilities. One was because the erosion from the river over there, it wouldn't fit anymore. So they talked about building a platform. That was one option, and the other was to put it where the quarry is.
Yeah.
Which is the lacrosse soccer practice field. But that was expensive. I mean, we're talking $800,000, probably something like that.
So you need an advocate, someone who's out there pushing for you, who's got a lot of money, and who can organize and get this for you.
Yeah.
Well, we need some of that land behind there that's right now is in, where our boundary is, where you're talking about the quarry there's a nice big place right there would be a place to put it. I don't know who owns that property.
Yeah.
That would be an ideal place to do it.
Well, there was a second, a few years later, we had the opportunity underneath the elementary school to build a track.
Yes.
And there was a partnership with the school board, the town, Parks and Rec, and Mars Hill, and we were going to build a track facility. And so, obviously, the school board was providing the property, Parks and Rec had a grant to extend the nature trail
Right.
to go up over the top of the hill around there and do a lot of the grading. It was all one big grant. And then when all that was done, Marcet was going to pay to have it. Well, Department of Transportation was going to pay it for free. And then we were just going to rubberize it and finish it. And so our commitment to get that track was like not even $100,000, which is like nothing in the big picture, you know. And so it turned out, I guess, and I don't know all the political stuff that went into it, but in the end, the grading work cost more than they thought it was going to. And so that wound up eating the budget to finish some of the other stuff. And so when it came time, it was going to be a little bit more, we backed out. And so it's been sitting over there for 10 years.
Space.
Is the space still available?
Yeah.
And over the course of like, well, this was 2006. And Dean Goforth, Craig Goforth will attest to that. Because Craig was a big mover, being on the school board, that we've 3 times we've gone back and got updated bids and quotes, handed them off to the powers to be, and they just died on the table again. So,
And that was still, then of course that could actually still be the best location.
Let me ask you a question that might be related. How is your support from parents of your runners? Are they there for you? Do you get to know them well?
oh yeah, it's if you're talking about financial, then you know there's
Well,
that part doesn't.
Or is there nobody's in there who's got the money?
No. But I would say that we probably have one of the best followings of any school. I mean, our parents come and
They're there.
oh yeah, and they'll travel to all the meets. So like every week, I have a mailing list and an email mailing list, and I send out. We're going to be here, and this is when we're going to be there, and they show up.
And they're there. Hey, I'm sure you thought of this. Is there a way to organize them to let them find a way to find money for you? Would they organize themselves? Is there anybody in there who would do that?
I think I've always said that it's different. Like when you're in high school and you know you're raising money for the band or whatever,
Right.
You've got all those families right
there.
But in college,
They're scattered.
they're all over the place. And the other part is like, it's probably my fault. Is like my personality. I'm hard pressed to ask someone that's paying $20,000 in cash. You know, can you give us $500 more so that we can buy uniforms for your kid or something like that? I mean, I just can't do that. And I know a lot of coaches do, but that's not in my mindset.
That probably is something that probably to go to the president or someone who's already officially raising money, or the development office or the advancement office.
Yeah. And I would tell you the other part is that the difference for cross country and track is that, like, if you're a fall sport, just to choose football for one, you compete in the fall, you're off in the winter, and then you have spring practice and training. And so as a coach, you're going, I mean, don't take that the wrong way, they work their butts off,
Right.
but in the winter, there's a lot of free time. And then they're like halftime in the fall. Not that they don't work 40 hours, I'm not saying that, but the tension and pressure and all that of being in season is only 1 out of 3. But for our sport, and this is especially true for the kids, they're going full blast. I mean, we are done with cross and we're already training for indoor track. And as soon as indoor track comes, we're right into outdoor track. So those kids are in season all year long. And so are the coaches. I mean, there's not hours in the day there probably is. I shouldn't say that, but
I see you down there on Saturdays and Sunday mornings with your crowd.
Yeah, plus there's all the, if we're not traveling to a meet, that's the other thing is we probably go to 25 Saturdays a year that we're gone. And then those other Saturdays where you're on campus recruiting or doing something. It's
How do you travel? Do you have a college vehicle to carry you?
Well, we're a charter bus now.
Okay.
It's not always been that way, but we're big enough that
You just charter a bus?
We're charter bus, yeah. Yeah, because there's Brad Nagel, our assistant coach, who my plan is when I retire in a year or 2 or 3, whatever it is, that he will be our head coach because he's amazing. But it's just Brad and I, and we've got 30, 40 kids. You can't fit them in 2 vans.
How long has Brad been with you?
Brad, 5 years as a student, and he was a decathlete here,
Yeah.
and still holds a decathlon record. He is quite an athlete. And actually, John Starr was here as our assistant coach when Brad was here, and it just, the timing was John was leaving to go to move to South Carolina with his family, and he just got married. And like Brad graduated, the job opened up, and we needed a track coach, and I've just always felt that it needed to be someone in the family because we knew each other. And he stepped right in. I mean, I offered him a job right away, right out of college, and he jumped at it. And so he's been here 9 years.
But it's, for an assistant, that's amazing.
And the thing about it, like in track and field, you know, there's a USA Track and Field has like 3 levels of coaching, like education, I guess. And one is just, level 1 is like your high school coach goes to it. I've been to, you know, just like you go and it's a weekend of general, this is what you should be doing, you know. And then they have what's called level 2 certification, and that's in the 4 disciplines: throws, jumps, sprints, and then distance.
Yeah.
And those are like a 1 week intensive with Olympic coaches, and it's hard and very expensive.
Let me ask you about the Olympics. Speaking about that, I was looking up the Olympic the history with cross country, and I discovered that in 1924 was the last official Olympics in cross country as an Olympic separate sport. It's still part of the pentathlon, I think. Isn't that right? That's still one of the things that there's no special entry for, but part of the pentathlon. Am I right about that?
Wow, you're catching me off guard here, yeah.
In addition to this,
It's not a team sport anymore.
That's
what
what
you're saying. Yeah,
That's what
you
you
need to do.
Yeah, not a team sport. But I also heard that, and I don't know whether this is true, that this year, 2018, that may change, and it may, the first of these may take place in Buenos Aires. I don't know.
That's cool.
How do you judge, how do you know where you want to take your students? When you read of competitions, how do you do that? How do you make those decisions?
I think it depends on, you know, I mean, if you, I know you've done your homework, and you can see that, you know, for many years we were really good.
Yes, I know.
And the world's changed, our conference has changed,
Yes.
and we're not really good right now. So that's changed the thinking, you know. For years, like we knew that we were going to win the conference meet, you know, so we would train for the region meet. We wouldn't even train for conference, because at conference you run the 8K, but after that, 2 weeks later, you have to run a 10K. So we would always train for the 10K.
Right.
Well, now we're getting beat up in the conference, and so we have to change our whole training theory, and that changes where you go and what you do. So, but I've always been one like, we never go to these little small meets with 4 or 5 schools where,
Right.
what's
So
the
you
point
ain't
of
out all the
winning, you
time.
know? Yeah, we take the kids where they get spanked, and we, like our first meet each year, traditionally we go to Appalachian, and
Yeah.
like last year it was Florida, Florida State, Texas, East Carolina, Mars Hill. We got whipped. But the kids,
It's okay. They
yeah, because it brings more out of them, you know. And you know, like if you can get online, and those kids, you know, from this like Texas, oh my gosh, they are amazing. But if you get on that line and you stay, and when I say whipped, I don't mean like they,
Right.
you know, they just crushed us, but you know, we lose. But the experience is amazing, and if you can line up against those teams, then later on down when you line up against, you know, Carson Inman or whoever, it's a whole lot easier.
That leads me to a question. You wouldn't be coach of the year all these many times if you weren't good. I'd like to know, what is your strategy? What is your approach to what you do? How have you figured out a way to win?
Recruiting?
That's a great answer. I could probably say that about actors too in theater.
Yeah.
So you recruit great people, but no, you have, what is your strategy in your work?
Well, I think a couple things. One is I think this is something you learn, and believe me, if there was a mistake to made, I have probably done it. You know, I mean, you just learn over the years. Like a lot of coaches will go and they just like go to the state meet and they just see, well, this guy's real fast, let's get him, you know, or try to get him, and you realize that strategy doesn't work all that well. First of all, the competition's ridiculous. To get, I mean, You know, in North Carolina, there's 19 division, I think it's 19 Division II schools. Plus you got Western and Appalachian, and the competition is ridiculous. So you've got to like kind of recruit kids that you know would fit into your program. And so, and also we have a lot of teammates. Like a guy comes, or a woman comes here by their junior or senior year, they're recommending someone else from their school that we already know, that they ran with for a year or two, so we know, you know, what they're like. And and of course, we're really big about official visits, like, because we have no money. Like Brad and I haven't recruited off campus in over 4 years. I mean, I've not been to a high school meet, not seen a high school runner.
Is it because there's not time?
There's no money. And we have no money in our budget, literally, to travel.
So how many scholarships do the men have in cross country, and how many do they have?
Well, there's in Division II, there's 3 levels. I think.
Yeah.
There's fully funded, which for cross is 12.8.
And that's what you...
That would be track and cross country combined for our men's team, 12.8 for the women. And then there's what's called the conference limit. And for years and years and years, even though there's that limit, the conference limit was like 1.8.
Yeah.
And Mars Hill had 1. So for years and years we had 1. And so like if you're in a conference like Chapel Hill, if you're in that conference, you have to full fund every sport at the full conference level.
Sure.
But in Division II and in our conference, we don't do that. And so for years, the difference between 0.9 and 2 was doable. You could, you know, I always said we worked harder, we got some better class character kids, and we were able to overcome that. And then in 2006, we admitted our first non-football school, and then that grew. It was Lincoln Memorial and Anderson, Queens, and Coker, yeah. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, there was enough of a voting block between them and Wingate and Lenore Ryan, who have all kinds of resources, that they voted to move the conference limits to the NCAA max. So now everyone, you know, not everyone is at that, but the teams that matter are at 12.8, and Mars Hill's at less than 2 for the men and 2 for the women.
Yes,
So
that's the real difference.
that's
what has
the real
happened to
difference.
all our sports.
Yeah, not just us.
It hasn't been the disaster in football as much, because those schools don't play football.
Yeah.
Before you mentioned don't play football. That used to be a requirement in the conference. You had to play football.
So
yeah.
I mean, my opinion is that either we got to figure something out and at least get us to the halfway mark, or we need to change conferences.
Yeah.
One or the other, but we don't belong in the sack where we are now.
No, and that's...
Are we have a new president coming in,
Yes.
just this week, as a matter of fact, to the university, and I'm sure at some point you'll talk to him about your program, and he'll talk to you. Have you got a plan in mind that you want to say, that you've written down, Dr. Floyd, this is what I want to have to do the best work? Have you got something like that already?
Well, just from what I've been hearing, it's not going to be a team by team. It's going to be a
bigger sport
program, athletic program sort of thing. And I think there's probably a lot to it. I mean, we probably need an athletic fundraiser, someone that's dedicated to athletic
dedicated toward
fundraising.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be a big
It would
step.
that makes sense to me, because the program now, since Title IX, so much has changed. But it seems to me that the university here would have always benefited, even from the very first time you were here, to have had someone separate doing that. You can't. I think it's probably not realistic to expect as we are set up now in our size, to have an advancement program that can do also field work.
Yeah.
Is that probably true?
Yeah, I believe so. Someone that knows athletics and
That's right.
specializes.
You have to know it.
Just like when they went to see Dr. Belk, if they
Yeah.
spoke the language,
Didn't know a lot.
I felt like there would have been a different outcome.
Right.
Especially because when we went to the dedication for the LR track, Orion track,
Yeah.
Dr. Belk actually told us that.
Really?
Yeah. He and his, well, he didn't tell me personally, but he told one of our students.
Yeah.
He said basically, he asked one of the boys, and he said, do you go to Mars Hill? And he said, yes, sir. And it was Dr. Belk and his lawyer. And he said, how do you like this track? And he says, it's outrageous. I mean, it's a beautiful track. And he says, this track should have been yours, basically is what he said. I won't mention names, but He said, "You should have been your track."
So you think that door is openable, reopenable?
I don't know, because, I don't know. Well, yeah. I mean, he just built a wing at track 2 years ago.
Well, and then you folks are board too here at the university with a new president. There's a whole, might be an opportunity for a whole new approach. Let me ask you a question totally unrelated to any of this.
Okay.
In the theater, I'm thinking about, you and I have similar things in a way, because we're coaching young people, doing different kinds of performance areas. I have directed casts of all women, and I've directed casts of all men. Okay, you know where I'm going with this question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. How is coaching different for a group of your women team as opposed to your men? What do you do that's different?
I would tell you first, I always say that it goes in cycles. Like, when we first won the conference in '96, we were good, obviously, but we weren't that good. But the first team that made it to nationals was our women's team. Our women qualified that year.
Why?
And I still say that's the best team we ever had here.
Why?
Who were the ones on there?
It was, well, we had two girls that would eventually be region champions, Stacy Mark
Yeah.
and Mitzi Carr. And then probably the best female athlete I ever coached was named Krista Williams. She wasn't like a superstar, but she held every school record from the 100 to the 800 and all the jumps before she left, and was all region across. And then another girl, Shauna Gold, or not Shauna Gold, I'm sorry, just Shauna, I'll just say Shauna. She's married now, that's her married name. And she finished second in the conference. And then our fifth runner, who was kind of an afterthought, was Becca Peasy.
Yeah, we're going to talk about her.
Yeah. So we want to talk about her now, but that team was so good.
Why were they so good?
Just talent-wise, they were amazing. Well, I don't want to give away a story about Becca, but if she's relegated to being our fifth best runner, you can get a picture. Like Stacey Mark was unbelievable, and just average in high school. And so
She had an incredible work ethic in everything she did. I mean, it was just, she just drove herself to do things, the classroom and everything. She was an overachiever, you could say, in the classroom.
Okay.
But I guess my point is that, like, I didn't have to do anything really, but get out of their way, so to speak. And I know that's exaggeration, but they were so motivated. And that cycle goes like, now the girls, it's hands-on. They're not as talented and they're not as focused or whatever. And then for a while, like I said, the girls were just totally dominating the guys. Even though the guys were winning, the girls were so much better. And then the cycle just kind of changed, and it can be as simple as, I won't go into details, we had one bad recruiting experience that swung 2 or 3 girls to other places that would have kept the program running. And because we lost them, it was like a domino thing. Because when you have the really great kids, they recruit other great kids. I mean, that's when we talked about Jennifer Wiggins, she was the one who built the women's team. I mean, she was the first good runner we really had that was really good. And she brought other people with her because of the force of her personality.
So your approach both to the women and to the men as separate groups is, how is it different?
Well, I think it like I was saying, it changes. Like if you ask me like what was my style, like I'm not nervous right now, but because I'm good, I feel like I'm good in a real one-on-one, 2 people, 3 people. But if I have to like stand up in front of the team and talk to like 40 kids, I can do it. I'm not worried about doing it, but I'm not as effective. I'm better one-on-one, and then maybe it's an empathy thing or whatever. I always joke that like when I first started, I used to be like an old peer, kind of their peer, and I was their dad age. Now I'm grandfather age. I mean, and so.
But you've aged beautifully.
Oh, it's the men with white beards.
Yes, that's true. It's the beard. You were going to talk about a student just a minute ago, Don.
A student,
Talk about it.
Becca Peasy, I had her in class.
Did you? Yeah.
But who would have thought this? Go ahead.
Yeah.
What did she do a couple of years ago and she's going to do again?
Okay, tell this story now from the beginning.
Okay, well, from the beginning, she was there with us.
And her name is?
Becca Peasy. It's just like
P-I-Z-Z-I.
just like pizza with an I.
Oh, okay.
And so she and Stacy were best friends. I mean, they were tight, and Becca had already run the Boston Marathon 3 or 4 times before he came, and she talked Stacy into running a marathon. They wanted to run together, so they asked me, because we didn't officially have track at that moment. We had a track team, but it was unofficial, and so they said, can we run a marathon in the spring? It was a Smoky Mountain Marathon in late February. It started in Townsend, Tennessee, and ran out by Cades Cove, and really pretty marathon. And so I thought about it, and I said, what the heck, So I said, we'll do it together. And so the 3 of us trained. And of course they crushed me.
Of course.
And that was the one where I hurt myself and wanted to not ever do another one. So my last one I did with her. But Becca graduated and went on to stay an avid marathon runner. She had a child and was married and had a career, and it just took off. And so 2 years ago she entered the World Marathon Challenge. And
what it is.
It's 7 marathons and 7 continents in 7 days.
7 days.
Yes.
And so it's not a lark. I mean,
You have to get on a plane to get to these places. How many continents?
7.
All
Almost 7 continents, yes.
But you also have to, it costs $30,000 to do this.
Oh, gosh.
Because you have to pay for all those airfares and everything, all the logistics that go with it. So she went out and raised it herself. Got some sponsorships. Trained for this for a year. I mean, she was running 100 miles a week, easy. She had a nutritionist that volunteered all the time for her. So long story short, I started in Antarctica.
Antarctica, yeah.
And it was really interesting because they went, but the snow was so bad and the weather that they had a window. It was 8-hour window that if it didn't happen right that moment,
That was it.
everything was called off. And so it opened up, and she ran the first marathon, and I think they went to Buenos Aires, I think.
Yeah.
And then a third one, they came to Miami.
Miami, you were
And so John Chastain and I both went down there. And an interesting thing, is John and Becca were both in the academic enrichment program together at Marcel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they were old friends. So the 2 of us went down there, got to see her there, and then she went on, I forget exactly, Madrid and Dubai, and maybe somewhere, I can't remember, and finished in Australia.
Australia, I think she finished in Australia.
Australia. So along the way, she said she won. She won the overall for the women.
For the women.
And won all 7 marathons for the women, and set 2 world records.
But she also beat a bunch of the men too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a bunch of them.
A bunch of them.
Yeah.
And so this one's going to start, it's going to end in Miami.
Okay.
The one that's happening this time of year. It's going to, where does it start? Antarctica again.
Okay.
And then it's going to, I think it's either in Australia, Perth, but no, I think it's in South Africa.
Okay.
And then it's going to Australia, then it's going to Dubai, Lisbon, Portugal, somewhere in Colombia to do South America, and it's going to end in Miami.
Oh, cool.
And it starts, January 30th or something, February 5th it ends.
Okay.
So you're going to have to be in Miami February 5th. And what it said, the article said, and that was quoting her, that's what's different is back then you had to take care of your luggage. You went commercial.
Yep.
She said there will be a dedicated plane, so our luggage we can leave on there. And so she said that will be a real blessing.
Well, that day in Miami, I think we got there and the race started, I'll just say 8 o'clock, give or take a few. And so she was done about 3.5 hours, maybe closer to 4. And then all her family was there. There was probably 20 people. And we all went out to lunch. They had a window from when she finished, she had to be on the airplane at 4 p.m. And that included somewhere, they had hotel rooms where they could take showers and all that. So we all went out to eat, and then it was wham bam, and she was on the plane, sleeping on the plane overnight. When she literally got off the plane, it was back on the road.
I mean, this is
Incredible thing. How proud Jim must be of that story.
Oh, gosh,
We all were. You read this, it was some national news everywhere. It was great to read that. Let me ask you, if obviously you've been here for 30 years and you've had a chance to leave and consider leaving, I suspect Don probably might have thought that along the way somewhere too. Did you ever think about leaving?
Not really.
Not really.
Because Brenda was here.
That's right. That's right. You had your family. If one were to ask you, what is it about Mars Hill that's kept you here? What is it? What is it about this place?
That's a good question. I didn't think you'd ask me that. So I didn't think about it. Well, I guess I would say, well, part of it is I'm just like extremely loyal person, and I'm just kind of married into it. I love it here. I love the way of life. I haven't grown up in South Florida.
You have a daughter here.
You have a daughter here, yeah, who actually went to Mars Hill.
Yeah, yeah.
But she basically, you know, I can remember in the business office before coaching, telling everybody, you know, that we were going to have a baby. And then my daughter Rebecca was born, and so for years, you know, our team had to work concession stand. She grew up in the concession stand, like playing with Ray Rapp and Ray Rapp's son, Aaron, and Tim and Joyce's daughter, Miranda.
Yeah,
Mariah, excuse me. And so the three of them were like that, growing up together. So intertwined, she wound up coming to Mars Hill and graduated. She's a teacher now, and EC teacher in Greensboro, married to a former alum, Johnny Brown, and about to be a grandfather next month,
right.
so for the first time. So that changes a lot.
That changes a lot. What is the thing that keeps people here? What has it kept you here, really?
Well, of course, for me, part of it is the whole program. You know, just that. I don't want to say it's my program. That's not true. But just the fact that I've seen it grow and nurture, and I've been such a big part of my life. I just love it, and I'll be honest. There's the good and the bad. One is that, especially because the last 9 years we've been in McConnell, in the middle of campus, not in the gym. Like, I never see, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but I never see Coach Riggins. So, like, I have total autonomy over Brad and I do, and which is a good thing, but it's not a good thing when you need something.
Your collegiality goes.
Oh yeah, he's a great friend. I don't mean it like that.
Oh yeah, I understand.
But it's not like you have someone like looking over your shoulder with a thumb on you, telling you what to do. Because honestly, he doesn't really know anything about cross-country track.
Will you go into New Field House?
No.
You will not be a part of it.
We're going to be moved into the old gym.
Old gym.
But we actually, we know where we're going, and the kids are actually going to get locker rooms.
Of course, that place, they grew out of that years and years and years ago.
Yeah, for years we used to, when you'd walk down the back steps, there was a couple training tables there outside behind the back of the gym there, and that was our locker room. So the kids would leave their stuff there and just hope it was there when they got back. So McConnell's been a blessing, I mean, because we have that building to ourselves.
I didn't know that's where you were now.
Yeah, in the basement.
Yeah.
You've got theater people building things up over you, don't you?
Yes.
Shops upstairs.
Shops upstairs, yeah. But the cloggers are there, but they're not there a lot. When they have a show, they're there 24/7. When they don't, we might not see them for weeks. So we use their dance studio all the time. And so it's great.
Mike, this has been a great pleasure for John and me talking about your career. I'm disappointed personally that people don't know what you do enough. Obviously your sport is not one that everybody sees like football, and you're away for most of what you do, so we don't see it. And I'm disappointed that the campus doesn't know how successful you've been, not only just recently, but for years doing this, and we haven't had a chance to observe it. So I'm glad that the Memories Collection has had a chance to finally get this on tape so we know what your story is. And congratulations for all of this. It was a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Don. That made it special.
Great.